Welcome to my author Q&A. Today I will be talking about tenses. This is something that is surprisingly not talked about a lot when we talk about creative writing, but it's something that I've noticed in doing workshops and particularly looking at people's longer pieces of work, so when they're doing novel writing, that can often slip in your writing or can get missed. And the reason I'm talking about tenses today is because I got a great question from Elspeth Cook all about tenses and how to keep in tense. So she said, I don't know if you have any useful tips or would consider doing a video for staying in the right tense, recognizing when you have meandered into the wrong one. I have started to spin on the spot with all of this. It is one of those really frustrating technical aspects of writing that if you really enjoy the creative aspect, it can feel like a really niggly, annoying thing. But if it's something you can nip in the bud early, it can get resolved, and it's something that I think that can definitely be picked up before you send out a finished draft or what you think is a finished draft. So today I'm mainly going to be focusing on past and present tense. So I'm going to establish really early on about the difference between past and present tense, and the example I'm going to use is from my first novel, The Things We Thought We Knew. The reason I'm choosing that novel is because I regularly change between present and past tense. I didn't mean to make it challenging for myself, but I ended up making it quite a challenging book to write because I was changing from past to present. But it was also kind of fun to write that way. The first chapter of The Things We Thought We Knew starts in past tense. You came for me at midnight. If I wanted to make that present, it would be you come for me at midnight. The second chapter of my novel goes to present tense. So that was, I wake up to find my room has been entered ninja style during the night. If I wanted to make that past tense, it would have been, I woke up to find my room had been entered ninja style during the night. Hopefully you can hear the difference between past and present. The problem is sometimes we can't hear it until we read it out. So that's a great tip to begin with. Read out your work and kind of listen for if you think that something's not quite right with the tense. There is also a whole host of other technical tenses such as past simple, past perfect, past continuous, past simple, present simple, the present perfect, the present continuous, and I'm having to look at a list because there's so many of them. So what I've done, if you would like to look into those, is put a link below to a YouTube clip that is brief and short. It's only about 5 minutes, and it's a TED Ed lecture about all the different tenses you get in English. I really think it's important to emphasize at this point though that you don't need to know all of the technical past, present, perfect, continuous language to be able to write, because a lot of the grammar we learn is stuff that we kind of intuit, or we just have a feeling that this doesn't feel right because we've been using language all our life, even if we don't know the technical words for what we're using and when we're using it. So don't worry too much about all of the technical side when you're writing, because a lot of it will come to you naturally. But if you're really struggling with just staying in present and staying in past, that is what we are going to be talking about today. So why is it so common to slip out of past or present tense? For me, when I'm writing in the past, it's really easy for me to slip into present tense. And the reason for that is when you're really into your writing and really feeling the character's feelings and feeling the action as it happens, it's very easy to slip into present because that feels far more immediate. And I think that's fine for a first draft. If you're slipping in and out of past and present tense, allow it to happen. It's fine. It's in your redraft that it's really important to address those points. So here are my top tips in trying to stay in tense. First of all, I think it's really important to decide what tense is suitable for your story. So if you want your story to be really immediate and pacey, present tense is great. If you would like a more slower story, past tense works really well. It might be that the voice of the character really suits present tense, or that past tense gives you a bit of more of a reflective view over the story. Whatever the reason is, try and decide what's the best thing for your story, and the best way to decide that is to have a go at both. So you could have a go at writing a paragraph of your story in present tense and then rewriting it in past tense, or vice versa. It doesn't really matter which way you do it, but you will probably find that when you're writing, one will flow better for your story than the other. So another thing you can do once you've decided if your story is going to be in past or present tense is write that down in your notes. So it's probably useful to have some notes about your story or your novel that kind of puts you back in that space for when you leave big spaces between redrafting or writing. So when I'm writing a novel, I usually write down a list of all the characters' names. I will write a list of the setting, details about the setting that will help me remember what's important about that in the story. But I'll also write down things like the tense that the story is meant to be in and why I've decided that tense, so that I don't get confused when I go back, especially after I've left a big gap between writing and start going off into the wrong tense, which can be frustrating. If you're going to do what I did with things we thought we knew and have two tenses in the same story or novel, it's a good idea to put up a little signal for your reader so they know that you're going to be changing. So that could be a line break or a new chapter. That's the way I use a different chapter heading to indicate that we might be going into a different tense. Or it might be a subtitle or a date to indicate that you're going back in time. And if you're using different characters, which can often happen, it might be a case of just writing their name as a chapter heading so that we know that we're going to this particular character. It's going into past tense because this person lives in the past, and we're going back to this character and they live in the present. So just make sure you put a signal for your reader. Now, what I always suggest for first drafts is to write as much of it as you can as quickly as possible without thinking about the grammar, without thinking about spelling or any of that technical stuff. For me, if I'm thinking about the grammar and the technical stuff, then it stops the flow of the writing. I get too wound up in that, and then I can't even write a whole page because I'm really reflecting on all of those little niggles. So I get as much out as possible, and then on the redraft, I will look out for the technical things. And if tense is your current problem, I would suggest going through your entire draft solely looking at the tense and seeing if you have changed tense or if you're staying in tense. By just looking at tense, you're far more likely to not get distracted by the other elements of your story that you will want to edit as well. And if you find that you're going through it and you still can't really tell if you've changed the tense, have a go at reading out paragraphs, because often when you read something out, you can tell that something's not quite right. So I'm going to give a couple of examples of this. You came for me at midnight. A squishy hand, tugging mine, yanked me awake. Can you hear where the tense changed there? Now, if you didn't, and I know a few writers who really can't hear the tense change, it might be really handy to get someone just to look at your tenses and to read through your whole piece and highlight those bits. And if you're going to get someone to do that, try not to get them to look at anything else, because again, that will be a bit of a distraction. Unless you think it's going to be something that's really useful, in which case get them to do a general grammatical check. And for the people that didn't hear it, that was a sentence that was in the present, and the word that yanked it back into the past was yanked. So it should be, you came for me at midnight, a squishy hand tugging mine, yanking me awake. Tenses is one of those really fiddly technical things in writing that is so easy to miss. So don't worry too much if you have done a general check and you still feel like there might be a few bits that aren't quite working. Hopefully, if your writing and your story is brilliant, editors will look past those little grammatical errors, because their job is to look out for those and to change those in your edits. But what can be a problem with tenses is if you chop and change too much, or if they're really glaringly obvious, that it will confuse the reader and therefore muddy up the writing as well. So as long as it feels like your writing is flowing, it should generally be okay, and really trust your instincts with some of your grammatical choices, because some of it is very instinctful. If that's a word, I don't think it is. Thanks so much for your question, Elsworth. It was great to talk about tenses today. If you're watching this and you've got a question about writing, please do consider putting your question in the comments below, or follow me on Twitter or Instagram and send me a message or a question there. And if you found this or any of my videos useful, please consider buying me a coffee on the Ko-fi link below. It really does help me carry on doing this type of work. Thanks so much for listening, and I hope to see you next time.